Rowdy this quickly. We're still missing 30 people that can just hack in here. So it's going to be really interesting after this. Tea and coffee breaks, 15 minutes, I think, might have been a dream. It's the process of getting you all up and down, and there's all that ubiquitous bank break outside the Georgia, and all those other sort of formal stumbling blocks and getting everybody in and happy. Hopefully everybody's had a good break. I'm going to be convening this session in the absence of Lisa Duggan, who was very kindly offered to convene this bit, but he's still slightly delayed. We do have flights on track, I think, to get people back in today. The main Guernsey contingent should be arriving in early afternoon, so they'll make it for this afternoon's event. We will be updating you on what's going to happen with Biblets and business workshop probably at lunch, if that's okay, or just as we break for lunch. So this session, we're focusing this afternoon, in the later part of this morning, on data collection and beginning to understand our environments even more. I mean, every part of these presentations. Definitely. No phones in the cinema. Yeah, no phones in the cinema. We've been focusing all the way through, as we know, on data collection, the problems of data collection, and using data to respond to conservation efforts. In this second session, we have talks on eelgrass exploration here from Mel Broadhurt, who's been our marine ecologist on Ireland for quite a few years. We won't say exactly how many. And trying to get to grips with it, especially using volunteer labour. We've got Henry Glyn talking about bats monitoring in Jersey, which he's been doing for a remarkably long time, isn't it? Old enough for it, so apparently he's been doing it for the last 10 years, based with the UCL, and with allegiances, I think was the term used in Jersey, which is quite a good way of phrasing it. We're missing Liz Sweet, unfortunately, and we'll be fitting Liz's talk into tomorrow's programme. And then Cris Sellares is going to be talking about islands with islands, which is an interesting one. I'm very interested to see how the presentation comes together, Cris. Can't see it, but Cris. She's still writing a presentation.
I have it.
We have Chris's presentation, okay, which is a small miracle. Cris is going to be talking about islands with islands, which is actually the need for us to focus on how we look at our islands and what conservation within our islands really needs to be to get to grips with the fact they are small locations, but as small locations have to deal with all those big issues as well. So I'm not going to ramble on anymore. We'll get Mel up to start the second section. Thanks, Mel.
As Ron says, I'm Alderney. I am the Living Seas coordinator for the Alderney Wildlife Trust, and I'm also a regional coordinator for SeaSearch within Bailiwick. I'm discussing or presenting today the Bailiwick Eelgrass exploration project. It's really new. It started April this year, and it's linked and affiliated with these groups here. So it's the Wildlife Trust, the Société Guerniers, the Biodiversity Partnership, SeaSearch, and the Guernsey Biological Record Centre. What I'll waffle on about for the next sort of 10 minutes is eelgrass biology and its conservation importance. So those in the room that can be reminding what eelgrass is, where it is within the Bailiwick, and the project itself, and where we go from here. Eelgrass has scared me for a long time. I'm a marine biologist, and eelgrass is technically a terrestrial plant. So what you want to kind of like take away with you, it's a terrestrial plant that's adapted to live in the sea or the marine environment. It's a vascular plant that flowers. Again, that really scared me. It took me a long time to get that around my head. It falls under the genus Zostera, and there's about 35 of these different eelgrass species throughout the world. Within our region, that is like the Bailiwick, there's two key ones. The dwarf eelgrass, Zostera dominant, and the common eelgrass, Zostera marina. And when I talk about what you've got to think about, say what you see. Grass living in sediment. That is the best description of eelgrass. I've pinched this fantastic schematic from the University of Victoria on what eelgrass essentially looks like. It's got this beautiful root system underneath the sediment with rhizomes, and then you literally have shoots or blades grass, poking it much easier for marine biologists trying to understand terrestrial plants. It does flower, and what's interesting, within the blades or shoots, they have little air spaces called lacunae. That helps them stand up in the water. A bit like, bladder wrack, fucus vesiculosis. They've got those air sacs to let it stand up and photosynthesize. So I started to calm down a bit, trying to get my head around a terrestrial plant that's highly adapted to the marine environment. And here's a picture that I took in Longy Bay, which on the, if you haven't been to Alderney before, it's on the east side of our island. And as you can see, lovely grassy mat, but what you've got to think about underneath this sediment is that root system, and it can be a huge mat underneath. So these are our two species within our Bailiwick. The first one is dwarf eelgrass. A Guernsey SeaSearcher or volunteer gave a really good description a couple of weeks ago. Think about green spaghetti. That is what dwarf eelgrass looks like. Very small, thin. It occurs in scattered patches or dense meadows. This one you can walk across. So if you're on a sandy day, you might come across this habitat or this species. It's global distribution, mainly throughout the UK, heading bits of patches around Europe. Now this is the one that most people might associate with. It's the common eelgrass, Zostera marina. Much bigger, much longer. In Canada, some of their leaves actually grow to about 2 meters long. Really big eelgrass. It occurs again, patches or dense meadows, but this one it's lower shore, leading out to the subtidal. So this one you might see on an equinox spring, or if you're snorkeling or scuba diving. Both of these eelgrass, or most eelgrass, really like sheltered conditions. And again, for those that know me, I live in Alderney. It's windy. I'm not used to sheltered environments. I want a sheltered environment. So it's taken me a while to get used to eelgrass. Now, why is it important? This is, if you can go away from this presentation today, one of the core things, the big things I want you to go away is, it's really biologically diverse. This habitat is utterly amazing. It's not, doesn't support species that live within the grass. So most of you'll think seahorses, fish, squid. It's things that attach. You'll get endemic brown seaweeds attached to the leaves. Not only that, where that mat, those root systems underneath, it provides airspace. And that thing, like burrowing animals like worms, I'm not a worm person, there's a lot of them underneath eelgrass habitats, and snails are, burrowing animals. The other thing that's, for me, that's enlightening is it's back to that terrestrial plant. It provides leaf litter. There's a detritus food chain that I've had to try and understand. I don't understand. So it provides lots of different food webs. One of the other things is like decomposition. Again, it's all that leaf litter and minerals that not only go to other places, but they're stored within that sediment. So there's quite there's some evidence to come out saying that it's a good site for carbon, like all storage. Those root systems as well are actually stabilising the seafloor, so it prevents erosion. Again, it likes sheltered environments, but it's also providing shelter. So there is a theory, which I'd like to set up some surveys, that fish might use eelgrass to migrate and hide in during winter. So they might be using that little, stop-off zones when those tides are too strong. Now we know how exciting and important it is. It's also, I found it very sensitive. It's a vulnerable species. This is a habitat-forming species that actually is very sensitive. One example is in the 1920s to 30s, there was a wasting disease, and this really decimated quite a lot of the eelgrass beds and habitats throughout the UK. So much so there's evidence that, for the birders in the room, I'll get this right, Brent geese changed their diet from Zostera to different eelgrass. It really decimated, it basically blackened all those leaves and shoots, and everything died. There's no real information what happened to everything else, what happened to those other food webs. The recovery is very slow. They don't, scientific evidence shows they haven't fully recovered. So that was, very sensitive to natural impacts like that root system. Thinking of that mat underneath the sediment, it's actually only about between 5 centimeters deep. It's shallow, so any kind of physical disturbance is just going to rip that that species away. So things like storm events, wave action, extreme weather events will unfortunately destroy or at least hinder and reduce an eelgrass. And then we come into the throat, human impacts. Again, physical disturbance, anything you can think of, even bait digging at lower shore with anglers will disturb an eelgrass bed. Coastal development, doesn't like chemical spillage, who does? Doesn't like invasive species, who does? All these things make it quite a sensitive or vulnerable species. And again, let's just say this is a species that's not just by itself in the environment doing what it wants to do. It is a habitat forming species, which is fantastic. And as such, within our adjacent waters, a lot of other bodies and governments feel that it's an important habitat, or it's, we know it's sensitive, and as such, there's quite a long list of conservation designations. So, for example, in Europe, it's an Annex 1 habitat. Within the UK, it's a habitat principal importance. It's also a UK BAP. It's recognised as a feature within SSIs. In the Channel Islands, we do believe it is a very important habitat. Unfortunately, it's listed as an OSPAR species just because of that wasting disease that I described earlier. So, eelgrass within the Bailiwick. Because we kind of, all those bodies that I'm representing, we knew it's important, we knew it's sensitive and vulnerable, we were kind of like, where is it in the Bailiwick? So we turned to the GBRC, Guernsey Biological Record Centre, and we asked very nicely, please could we have your Zostera records? They've got about 351 from the 1900s. The first one's actually 1851. Really nice stories, things like there's a record of in Guernsey people using Zostera marina to fill their mattresses. So they, fantastic record, really exciting. Historically it's an important species within the Bailiwick. Some of these records, like I said, quantitative. So we've got some really nice SeaSearch surveys that are data that's held within the GBRC, and those like qualitative anecdotal records. I made a map. I like making maps. People know me. And this one was really hard, which is why I put it in. I had to ask Julia Henny to help me map this one, because extracting old data and putting it into GIS is hard. So you can see there's a nice, we've got some records, and in red, just to scare you all, I put, great, but are they verified? Do the old sites still exist? Are there new sites? So then we turn to other data sources that we know that are within the domain. SeaSearch again, if there's any surveys that we missed, things that we hold. I have completed some eelgrass recording, which is quite exciting. There are other bodies, independent researchers, and maybe some developers have actually acknowledged eelgrass, and it hasn't fed into the GBRC. Again, great, records verified. Are there old sites? Are there new sites? And we came up with this assumption that it's abundant across the Bailiwick, but we don't know anything about it. We can't inform, government or scientific bodies where it is, what type of beds there are, what are the associated species. We can't say, we know it's important, but I can't say there's designate that as an important site. I haven't got the evidence. And this is really where this exploration project came from. I'm a simple person, so I made a simple aim. Increase knowledge on the presence, location, and composition of the Zostera genus across the Bailiwick. So Zostera, it's those two, it's the dwarf eelgrass and also the common eelgrass. With two simple objectives, hopefully. Again, presence, distribution, extent, and ecology within the Bailiwick, but we also wanted to make it as a citizen science project. We wanted to encourage and enthrall the public on this amazing habitat that actually looks like it's really abundant in the Bailiwick. We also wanted records, and being lazy, perhaps they could go and record for us. And the other thing we found I sometimes struggle, defining a habitat to the public to say, this is an amazing habitat. Eelgrass, I found it very easy. It's got sexy species like seahorses. Everybody wants to go out and find one. It looks easy, grass in the sediment. Oh, I've seen that, I know where that is. So we thought actually we could use stakeholders and the public to help push the cording of this important eelgrass around Bailiwick. So we have several methods. The first one is to really look at that data, which I have, and it's kind of to give that in-depth review of our eelgrass records. So things like the majority of those records have come from secondary sources. So they give us a feel of eelgrass within the Bailiwick. I'm slightly cautious of that data. So these two match, so the core information, where they've been recorded through survey work, through SeaSearch work, or the porcupine reed field work, or other independent work that we know of. And it really, even though records start from the 1900s, 94 is really when I've looked at it and gone, that's good. Those are verified records, which is quite interesting. And from that sort of desk-based assessment, I've then led on to some key recommendations. And these might look simple to you, but this is a new project. We want to get that record recording accurate. So define key parameters. Recorder, location, time. Is there a video? Is there a photograph? Can we do a SeaSearch survey? Key things. Where are we putting this data? Where does it get held? So things like straight to the Guernsey Record Centre and through the SeaSearch, which will then feed back into the Guernsey Record Centre. From that data, we can look at areas or things that haven't been recorded, and identify engagement activities, sort of what we can do. And finally, we want to link to some bodies. Our second method is training or engagement. So we're linking to lots of different groups. This is a workshop that we gave in the summer, kind of engaging those people to record eelgrass. And then one step further, I have to mention Tim Harvey. He got trained as a Guernsey sea-searcher in March, and his aim is to go out and record eelgrass throughout Guernsey, and he has. He set up a Google Drive where all of us can access and just talk to each other, say, I've recorded there, it's not there. So all the red marks are where shall we investigate, blue marks are the historical data that I've added. The yellow ones are where people have gone and not found eelgrass, which is also important. We then go on to fieldwork, so from the data and the engagement, we can look at doing field-based surveys and link to other groups. So quite a few people in the room have helped collect Zostera seeds to help build a new or develop a new eelgrass bed in the UK. And that's quite an exciting one to help them. And then finally, we're doing iterative reporting. So each year, we're going to report back on our surveys and then reassess, are we doing it accurately? Is there something that we've missed? So this is a nice map of our old historical data with that core data. So things like maybe we should look there, maybe we should look there, which is fine. So our next steps. I've got to complete a summary report. We're going to link to other bodies and encourage more data collection.
Next up is come on down. And just to warn you, Claire has a selection of notes there. She holds them up. I should have mentioned that before. With 5, 10.
I spotted those. Yeah.
Really angry face.
Just skip straight to the angry face. I think we'll be okay.
Hello, my name is Henry Glyn. I'm a researcher at University College London, and I've been working for a number of years on acoustic back monitoring in Jersey. But for the last couple of years, we've been looking at developing a new island-wide scheme for back monitoring, making use of new technologies, which is what I want to talk to you about today. Now, this is a picture from Alexander Pope's essay on criticism, where we get the phrase to err as humans and forgive divine. And with citizen science-led monitoring programs, we quite often have to look at the kind of error introduced into the data that we get through volunteers who may be, at varying skill levels, or through incidental records that can't be sort of verified, very similar to what we've just been hearing with the Eelgrass records. But with the sort of rise of big data and these new technologies that allow us to gather huge amounts of data, we've got to find new ways of actually being able to analyse that and manage that. And that in itself introduces another source of error. So I'm going to flip this around on its head, and we're going to talk about how to err isn't just human, computers can do it too. And actually, we've got to, set some kind of limits to how much error we're willing to think about. So before I get too deep into it, I just want to say a few thank yous to all these organisations who kind of helped out, particularly Government of Jersey, and Kate Jones and the lab group at UCL. That work has been extremely helpful. And also, this is just a few of the volunteers who have helped out with the project over the last couple of years, particularly Mum and Dad, who sort of put up with bat detectors spread all over the house. And Sarah's up there because she's great, but also representing sort of 30 or so volunteers that joined us for this year's survey, which is fantastic. I couldn't get photos of them without stalking them on Facebook, which I thought would be So just very quickly to give a bit of background, I want to talk about why it's important to monitor species. We all know about some big global declines in biodiversity and challenges like the climate crisis, etc., and as conservationists, we operate in this world where there's very limited funding for the kind of work that we do, and we've really got to have an evidence-based approach to discovering or to determining where we're going to spend those limited resources, so that we can prioritise efforts that are going to, maximise the benefits. And one of the really things that's important part of that is assessing trends in populations and what's happening to different species at this current time. But it's important to recognise that is one kind of area of it. And bats in particular are really cool, for one, but also they're really important parts of ecosystems, providing services like pest control, in other parts of the world, pollination, seed dispersal, forest regeneration, all sorts of things, which is great. And they're really important indicators of environmental health due to their sort of high trophic position. What if we have big impacts to species lower down the trophic web, then we'll start to see impacts in bat populations, which we can use to make wider inferences about the environment as a whole. But they're tricky because they fly around at night and they're tiny and they're really difficult to see. So we can't use a lot of the traditional methods that you would use for looking at species. But we're very lucky in that, as I'm sure you will know, they echolocate. So they produce these ultrasonic sounds as they're flying around, which help them navigate, find prey, etc., etc., etc. And we can actually make use of all this like acoustic information they're leaking into the environment by recording it, and then using that to make assessments about what's happening to bat populations. And I can't remember what's the next. Okay. So there's a couple of different ways to do this, and I've got to apologise for the Wizard of Oz thing. I had to steal this from an old presentation I think called Searching for Bats Over the Rainbow. But luckily we're in a theatre, so I don't have to admit that I kept it just because I like the shoes. So what you could do is go out and walk a set route all the time with your bat detector with a group of friends, or if you're really smart, attach it to a vehicle of some description and drive around. And you can actually cover a large area and get a lot of acoustic data. And it's really good in that, if you're moving along, you can kind of make an assumption that you're not going to be encountering the same bats, so you can start looking at kind of relative abundance and things like that. But because they're moving around, you also miss a lot of variation in bat activity that changes throughout the night. So the other kind of main approach that's followed is the IIEM approach, where you go and stick a bat detector out on a pole somewhere, and then go home and relax on your chaise longue. And this is fantastic because obviously we can see the immediate benefit that we are reducing the amount of time that we're having to spend in the field doing these surveys. So we've got a cost saving, and because we're leaving the detectors out all night, we actually get the full range of temporal variation that we get within each site that we're surveying as well. So we can get a really good amount of data. But because they're static, we don't know if one bat's flown around the detector 10 times or 10 bats have flown past once. So we can't currently look at sort of abundance metrics, although there's a lot of work going on with sort of statistical clever people who are kind of working on that problem. and I won't mention that a bit later. So bat monitoring in Jersey, at the moment, this is a very brief thing of what's going on in Jersey. There's actually a lot more. But in terms of monitoring trends in bat populations, the main kind of survey is the IBAT survey, which is a driven transect-based approach, which has been going on for about 10 years now, and we've just got the sort of 10 years worth of data that we're hoping to process and start looking at what's happened to bats in Jersey over the last 10 years. There's also roost monitoring going on, advanced surveys with trapping bats, and various acoustic surveys kind of separate to IBATs and what I'm going to be talking about. But moving forward into the future, with this new increased accessibility to new technologies, with the cost of bat detectors going down, the development of automated systems for classifying species, and something else that I can't find in my notes. We've got opportunities to rethink how we do this. And so we chose to take this approach using new low-cost acoustic sensors, combined with sort of brand new artificial intelligence-based species classification systems to see whether we could design this kind of monitoring program for Jersey. And the reason we wanted to do that is Jersey is very keen to have a look at the way that it manages bat monitoring and other species monitoring, and whether we can do it smarter and cheaper, etc., etc. And all in order to sort of fulfill our obligations that we're signed up to under the various MEAs that we're part of, like Eurobats, etc., etc. So we started to put together this survey based on these cheap detectors, where we wanted to basically lay out a sensor network across the island of Jersey in various different habitat types to see, what we were recording. And we want this to be, again, citizen science led, in order of driving down costs, getting more data, etc., etc. And like we were talking about before, it's a really good way to engage people with the species and their conservation when they sort of get out and do it. So just a little, actually no, I won't do that. So just quickly to go through what the survey kind of looked like. We used the phase 1 habitat survey of Jersey, which we simplified down into 6 categories, which we then actually, since I made this map, got rid of miscellaneous and a few other things. And we basically wanted to take an approach where we wanted the number of sensors in each habitat type to be proportional to the amount of habitat available in the island, following a randomly stratified design. So we deployed, in 2018, we deployed 90 sensors across the island in these different habitats, and they were left continuously recording throughout the night for 3 consecutive nights. What I'm not going to talk about today, unfortunately, is the survey that we did this year, and that's because of kind of hold-ups with data management issues, basically, which I want to get back onto at the end. But this year we surveyed 50 sites. I think I've got the summary somewhere. And we were using these audio moths, which are these low-cost sensors. So the sensors that we used to use mostly in Jersey, Wildlife Acoustics SM4s cost about £1,200. An audio moth will cost you about £40. So it's that kind of driving down the price, making things open source, which has really enabled us to do a survey on this scale. And then the kind of computer component of it is a 2-stage artificial intelligence based process, where first we run it through this one called Bat Detect, which basically converts the audio files into a sonogram, cleans it up, scans through, and then assigns a probability for each moment in time in the recording that there's a bat call present. Where it thinks it's detected a bat call, it then goes into Bat Identify, which uses a convolutional neural network to compare known calls that we have in the library to the calls that we've got in our data, and then to assign them a species classification, and importantly as well, a probability. So our main kind of aims for this round I'm going to talk about, we wanted to have a look at the error rates in automated species stuff. We wanted to have a look at initial occupancy and detection estimates, and we wanted to see whether the survey design is actually going to deliver us the results that we need over a period of time. So this is just a summary that I'm going to skip through, but you can basically see we're getting 627,863,000 files from each one. So that was 4.5 terabytes in 2018, 5-ish terabytes in 2019. So it all starts to add up. And this was a really basic, I apologise for this, I didn't have time to fix that. But if we go through very quickly, we've got, so these are species that have been recorded: barbstell, serotine, alpha-foe, becksteins, brants, dorbentons, whiskers, natterers, noctule, lyslers, pips, Methuselahs and coarse pipistrelle, horned pipistrelle, spiralo pipistrelle, brown longing, grey longings, great horseshoe. But don't worry about that. What's kind of is this kind of class probability on the side, and that's the confidence level the detector assigns to its tools. And we kind of want a way of saying, well, you know, how much of this data can we actually use based on the automated classification? Is there some kind of cutoff point or what? So we wanted to do some modelling using error rates within the thing. So just very quickly, we used 1,000 files just to assess how accurate the detector was, and about 15 calls per species for each confidence level to have a look at how accurate the classifier was. So this is for call detection, and as you can see, this is just from 0.5 to 1 in the confidence levels, and you can see it's exceptionally high. I think on average it's about 95% accuracy across all confidence levels, which is fantastic. So we don't need to worry too much about that. The call classification is a bit more difficult. We can see some obvious problems with barberstells up there and greater horseshoes down here. I will say I've amalgamated some of the species, but I don't have time to mention that properly. A lot of these misidentifications for barberstells are actually due to insect noise. We think particularly certain moths which makes a bit ultrasound. And the greater horseshoes was largely machine noise coming from the detectors themselves and from the wider environment around them. But you can see for some of these species like serotines, myotis, pipistrelle, Methuselahs and cools, and common pipistrelle, we're actually doing quite well already, which is an improvement on the current systems that are in place. And we basically use this to pull out where we can cut off the data to get certain levels of where we know the number, where we know the rough proportion of error within the data set. Again, not going to have time to mention it too much. Just a quick confusion matrix, which shows where the confusions between different species were. So basically, we want to have the bright blue line going up the middle. As you can see, it's a bit patchier than that, but it's still early days, so that's good. Occupancy modelling I did for these species, but you won't see any results for common pipistrelles because they were so abundant across the island that every model we ran just was too close to them being absolutely everywhere. So we've got those. We have a really great. I'm not going to dwell on this very much because it's really difficult to look at. But essentially, what you can see, so these first lot are serotines, and you can see this is the lowest, or this is accepting the highest amount of error. And in these more error-prone versions, you can see the occupancy is quite high, and then all of a sudden it drops when we get to the least error, lowest error tolerance. Detection probabilities are quite stable, but again, like I say, we only got these results out the other day, so I don't want to dwell on it too much just yet. But what we could do is use them to run a power analysis, which is based on a simulation that was published in 2012, where we can have a look at how, if we vary survey design, is it going to affect our ability to detect these long-term trends? And this is based on, for those of you who are interested, a single species, single season occupancy models, and taking a difference between any two points in time, basically. And just sort of to summarise it, so this is based on 30 sites having 6 visits each, and I've just picked out 4 of the analyses that we've run to give you an idea. And you can see it's not, so we basically want things to be above the black line for it to be, very good, that we'll get a good trend. And as you can see, if I flick through a few, by increasing the number of sites, we can make sure we get these top species, Pygmaeus, Pipistrellus, Placotus, and Methuselahs cooley, into a sort of safe zone. Actually increasing the number of sites seems to give us the big gains. When we increase the number of visits, we increase our ability to detect species with a lower detection probability, but it's going to be a bit of a job to get down there. But that's all something that's, it kind of needs more data to be fed into, and we're hoping the 2019 data, which we collected slightly differently, in order to try and get more representative occupancy and detection estimates, is going to help out. So when that data is finished running, we shall hopefully see. So I think there's a compromise to be made that needs to be thought about, but I think, my kind of impression at the moment is increase the number of sites as best we can. So then, just finally to conclude, announce 2019 data is the first kind of thing that needs to happen. Like I say, there's problems with sort of data management, data hold-up, which leads me on to the next thing, which has been mentioned a few times, which is this data storage and management issue. We're collecting a lot of acoustic data which needs to be stored, and then the results from processing then also need to be stored. I think, moving forward, we need to really consider how Jersey's data is going to be stored, where it's going to be held, and how it's going to be managed for the long term. Species classifier is, like I say, still in the very early stages. It's not been published or anything yet. We need to do some work to build that up, which there's a lot of potential to do. There's some new clustering-based algorithms that are built into the BAT identify system that we can use to actually develop a species classifier for Jersey relatively easy if we have a cool library built up. An integration of different survey methods. So, like I said before, this is just one kind of aspect. We need to carry on doing things like the trapping and other acoustic surveys and roost visits and things, because they actually all complement each other in giving us this overall picture. And there's some nice new occupancy models out there that incorporate false positive rates, which you can actually use these other survey methods to kind of calibrate your acoustic data that you're using, which is really good. So hopefully we're going to have a look at them. Some additional uses as well, that like this kind of system can be used for monitoring habitat management activities like developing wildlife corridors. It can be used to have a look at swarming sites and what species are using them. I was talking to Paul Rowe from the Queensland University of Technology the other day, and he's been using similar kind of systems to develop early warning systems for when cane toads arrive on islands with high levels of endemic species. So they've got this piece of AI which hears a cane toad and then sets up an alarm, which I assume just gets everybody running down to wherever the sensor is with a shovel or something. But there's also good potential to include lots of other taxa. So there's already classifiers out there for birds, crickets, honour insect. There's ones out there for gunshots, all kinds of stuff. And also just kind of looking at the acoustic environment, which is really important for our human beings' mental well-being and things like that, but also it's going to impact how species use the environment. So there's a really big potential there. And then finally, I just wanted to say an opportunity to develop a kind of Channel Island bat acoustic survey. Following this technique, pooling our resources and working together, we can actually, not just for acoustic stuff as well, but we can, by pooling together, we can improve the resources that we've got to give the training that we've been talking about, so that local volunteers can get involved and do more, or to go out and collect more data. And frankly, who doesn't want a survey that's called Ciabatta? So on that note, I shall leave you to happy to answer any questions after the session.
Right, Cris in the room now.